But number two is the technology should not be so overly complicated that the teacher feels like they have to, spend hours learning how to use it. Me and my buddies in EdTech, we use this thing called budget outlets. Meaning, is there a tool out there that will allow the teacher to have a budget amount of time, meaning a little bit of time to learn it, but have a huge outlet for the kids to showcase voice and choice and visual learning from their desk or from their home?
Well, hello and welcome back to From the Garoffice, a brand new podcast. This is episode number 2, and this is my Garoffice, my garage office. Now, you're going to be watching or listening, depending on if you're watching on YouTube, which you can find at youtube.com/Micah Foster, or on Spotify and Anchor, and soon to be on all the other platforms as well. You can find the podcast From the Garoffice with Micah Foster. So this episode in particular is very interesting. Again, it's only the second episode, but I interview Joe Marquez, who is a technology and education expert. And I say expert because I mean expert. He teaches teachers how to use technology to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. Some of the topics we go over are eSports and its impact on collegiate sports, and also potentially impacting ministry and other things. We talk about specific tools like Flipgrid. We talk about just a myriad of things that have to do with technology, education, ministry, and even parenting, and parenting kids in this time. So that's towards the end. So anyways, I'd love for you to watch or listen to the entire thing and let me know what you think. Share with your friends who are educators, pastors, and parents. Enjoy. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you spending a little time with me. As you know, I texted you last week asking what service you use for podcasting, because I've been thinking about putting one on for a while. And I had a call with a guy from South Africa talking about how this whole digital transition is going for them. And we're both in ministry. And so we were talking about that sort of stuff. But you come from a different world where you've been engaged in technology and education for a long, long time. So give me a brief history of Joe Marquez in his technology and education journey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I wasn't originally a teacher. In fact, I worked in a lab called the Boyce Thompson Institute in New York, near Cornell, and did a lot of lab work extracting RNA to create clones of tomato plants, and that was a very boring job. And so one of my friends said, "Hey, why don't you move back home and become a coach for the junior high that we used to go to?" So I became a football coach for Alta Sierra, and I liked working with those kids so much. They said, "Why don't you start teaching?" So I got my teaching credential. And if you've ever been in an 8th grade science classroom, you know that, number one, the 8th graders don't want to be there. And number two, they definitely don't want to be in science class. And so it was really tough those first 2 years trying to figure out how to get kids engaged in the classroom to want to be there. And this was around 2008, right when the iPhone started coming out, probably about a year removed from the iPhone.
Okay.
And so all these kids were on these phones all the time. And I saw it as a distraction. And I to the point where I bought an illegal cell phone jammer from China, and I would turn that on in my class every day, and I would have it on my desk, and the kids would always go, "How come we don't ever get a signal in my class?" I go, "Why do you need a signal in my class?" And they're like, "Oh, we don't. Never mind." After about a year and a half of doing that, I figured to myself, I'm like, man, it's taken me so much effort to fight this. Let me figure out a way to utilize it. And so I polled the class and said, "How many of you have cell phones?" Half the class had cell phones. I said, "Okay, we're going to change our seats up to where if you have a cell phone, you're going to sit next to somebody without a cell phone. And we're going to start doing some activities with, some of these new tools that were coming out." And so one of the new tools that was out was called Poll Everywhere, where you put a poll up on the screen and the kids type in a code. And so I was able to get instant information. Like, did they understand? Did they have questions? Is there anything I needed to go over again? And instead of saying, "Does everybody get it?" Most of the kids would never raise their hand and say, "I don't understand what you're saying."
Right.
They just let the time go. And so being able to collect this information in a way that didn't make kids feel like they're standing out to the rest of their peers was incredibly important to me. So I started telling my administrators, "Hey, this is something that we should really look into. These kids, we can't just assume they're getting it. We have to make sure they're getting it. We can't wait for them to leave and then come back. We have to do it in the moment. And over time, I got my administration to understand that technology was important. And so Alta Sierra in Clovis Unified became one of the first schools in the secondary arena to have digital devices in all of their core classes. So math, science, English, history all had devices for their students. And we hit the ground running, and I never looked back. And I always told myself, if at the end of the year, I looked the same as the beginning of the year, I didn't do my job. And so I always tell teachers, if you change up or learn something new every couple weeks, by the end of the school year, you have mastered more things than you can imagine.
Right.
And so little baby steps to get to where you are, and then you look back and you made huge leaps.
Right.
And I tell my students the same thing, right? Never look at your grade now. I go, look to where you want to be and make those small changes every day so that you can reach that goal. And, I took that to heart. My fellow teachers took that to heart. And when I had the opportunity to expand on what I could do, and I left my district, and I now work with teachers across the United States on how to successfully implement technology, not as a shiny new tool, but as a chance to enhance the experience for kids, to increase that feedback cycle of what the kids don't know. How can you change that during class? And really just, let kids become creators of content, not just be consumers.
Right.
If you look at Common Sense Media, which is a great resource for anybody out there looking for technology uses of kids, they showcase that kids right now between the ages of 8 and 16, they are consumers of content 70% of the time, and they are creators of content about 4% of the time. And the only way that's going to change is if teachers start making sure students are utilizing ability in the classroom to be able to become creators of content. And that's the way I've always looked at things. And I really always want to make sure the kids are putting the learning into their own hands. And I'm more of a guide rather than the sage on the stage. I'm not just up there spouting information and hoping they get it. I give them an essential question, and then they become they go on a journey through technology to meet those standards. And I'm just there to guide them when they start, wandering off path.
You talking about the teachers or the kids?
Learners of all ages, I guess I should say.
So this is developed into, like, you're no longer in the classroom.
Correct.
With kids.
With kids, yeah. I'm working more with the administrators of districts across the West Coast of the United States, working with TOSA teams, which are teachers on special assignment who have been pulled out of the classroom to work on specific goals for a district, and making sure that things that they are implementing has a purpose. You like teachers would always say, hey, how can I use, let me give you a tool, for example, that's really popular. How can I use Flipgrid in my classroom? I would say, let's not ask how can you use Flipgrid in the classroom. Let's ask, what are your goals for your kids? What are the learning outcomes? And then let's go back and look at some of the tools that can help us reach those. So we never say, this is a tool you should use. We should always say, this is a strategy to get you to an ultimate outcome that you're looking for.
So not just like jumping on the latest thing and just because it's the latest thing, but thinking through, what am I trying to do and what's going to help me get there? And what are the tools available to me to reach that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I tell teachers all the time, I go, these are tools, just like you at home would have tools in your toolbox. You may use one tool more often than the other. You may have bought one for a specific purpose and it sits there for years, and then you go back and use it again. And so the same thing with educational technology tools. They're going to sit there, you know how to use them, and you use them when the moment arises, not just because you want to. And I always tell people, this is, you never go into Lowe's and buy a hammer and say, what can I hit? You always go into Lowe's with a project and then find the tool that's going to best fit that project. And so we have to make sure teachers are choosing their educational tools in the exact same way.
What? This is a hammer. What can I hit? I like that.
Exactly.
That's good. Now speak just for a second. Okay. So I know lots of educators, you know, lots of educators. You attend our church. You're a part of our church. We have educators in our church. There are educators who are pro using all kinds of new tools. There are educators that are like, I'm good. All right. I'm good. I don't need anything new. I've been doing the same thing I've been doing for a while. All right. I learned it this way. It's going to work. But now, okay, now we're hit into a crisis because right now what's always been is not possible, because my kids are home. We're schooling from home. It's a whole new world for us. We're not, educators in that way. And so like, it's difficult. So now teachers are having to suddenly dive into, if they hadn't already, all these different avenues of how they're going to accomplish the goal of teaching these kids from a distance. So Steve, speak to that little issue we're having right now.
Yeah, I love the thing that you said about, this is the way we've always done things, because I hear that all the time, right? Like, why should I change? I've been a teacher for 25 years. I've been doing it this way forever. My test scores are high. Why should I change? This is the way as I've always done things. This is the way I'm comfortable doing things. And, I've told my technology friends, I go, if there's any benefit to the situation we're all in right now, no teacher can say that anymore. They can never say this is the way we've always done things, because we can always point to this time saying, remember when we couldn't do it that way and we found a way to do it. And, I have a really good friend, and she was one of those teachers that whenever I would bring a new technology tool to her, or a new kind of way of doing things, she would well up a little bit with tears in her eyes, looking like I'm trying to change everything. And during this time, she's been contacting me saying, I never would have been doing these changes, but it's like trial by fire right now. I have to make them. And because I have to, I'm learning them, and I actually like using them. And I say, you see, that's exactly the thing. We have to be exposed to things that are new, but we also have to look at two sides of this coin. And the two sides is this. One of them is the technology going to benefit the kids in an enhanced way that traditional way wouldn't work? And I always say, if all you're going to do is use a computer to type a paper rather than write it, then don't use a computer. If writing is going to work the exact same way as typing, have them write the paper. The technology has to enhance the lesson in a way that it could not have been completed before. That's number one. But number two is the technology should not be so overly complicated that the teacher feels like they have to, spend hours learning how to use it. And so me and my buddies in EdTech, we use this thing called budget outlets. Meaning, is there a tool out there that will allow the teacher to have a budget amount of time, meaning a little bit of time to learn it, but have a huge outlet for the kids to showcase voice and choice and visual learning from their desk or from their home? And so that's why we come up with these lists of tools that can be learned really quickly by the teacher, how to push them out, tools that kids can really understand how to utilize relatively quickly. And then also the tools are going to enhance the lesson in a way that traditional teaching could not do that. And what I'm hoping is all these things that teachers are learning right now in a remote environment, they are going to find a way to utilize them in a face-to-face environment using something we call blended learning, half technology, half traditional. And that's the best way to teach. I'm a huge proponent of, if you're using technology 100% of the time in a face-to-face classroom, you're not doing it correctly. You cannot use it 100% of the time. But if you're not using technology at all, you're not really setting these kids up for success, because in 80 to 90% of all the jobs right now in the world, kids need to know how to communicate, collaborate, create, be creative, have critical thinking skills. And that's what computers allow us to do. And so if we're not allowing them to experience that, we're really not allowing them to reach their full potential once they graduate high school or once they go into college.
Right. So give me the list, give me the menu that you're kind of saying, hey, here's some of the options to get you through to the goal that you want. Here's some of the apps or the resources that we're toying with. These have the best budget outlet ratio, or whatever, however you said it. And within mind, this is not like, so go try all these, but just, these are some of the things that we're looking into that we're using ourselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of the tools, it also depends upon the ecosystem that your school or district is utilizing, such as if you're a Microsoft school, there's going to be a whole bunch of tools you'd rather use than if you're a Google school. Like if you're trying to do face-to-face right now, like I see a lot of teachers jumping on Zoom. It's a great product, but if you're already a Microsoft school, why not utilize Microsoft Teams? Because you can also push out assignments that way. You can communicate with text with their, it's an asynchronous way of communicating with the class, meaning you don't have to be face-to-face in real time. So Teams is a great thing to utilize. If you're using Google, I would be utilizing my Google Classroom. That's a great way to distribute work and do quick check-ins as well. Tools like Flipgrid. I've seen teachers just utilize a Flipgrid that has the question, hey, how you doing today? Quick check-in. Tell me how you're feeling. just so the teacher and students can have that face-to-face connection, but you don't have to rely on them actually showing up to a meeting time at like 9 a.m. It can be done at all different times. And then tools like Nearpod or Pear Deck, which allows you to have a slide deck presentation, but also ask them questions along the way, saying, hey, I just did 2 slides. Now you can ask a question about those slides and in real time see the kids answer. So some of those tools solve the problem. How do you know the kids are understanding what you're saying? And I always put my technology through a filter in this filter that I created called Inspect, Redirect, Make Correct. Meaning the technology that you're utilizing should allow you to inspect all student work in real time without having to go to each desk to check on them. And then if you're noticing half the class or some of the class is veering off the wrong direction, like they're totally not getting it, you should be able to stop the class, get everybody's attention, and redirect them towards the correct way. And then because the technology should enhance that feedback cycle, they should be able to make those corrections both on the assignment and in their brains before they leave the class. And studies have shown that if kids leave the class thinking one thing, even if it's wrong, it's so hard to get them out of thinking that way. But if you can change their mind or showcase them what is the true way to think about it before they leave class, that's the way they're going to think about it. And I always tell teachers, it's the same way with sports, right? Like when I coached football for 17 years, and the hardest person to train in a football stance is a student who's been taught the wrong way by their dad for years and years and years. And you're trying to get them out of that bad habit, but because that's the way they've learned it, they can't get out of it. The easiest football person to train, the athlete to train, is a kid who's just starting. And I know that may seem weird, but you can mold them from zero to hero in one day because they're learning from you. Same thing with these kids. If they leave with a misconception, they're going to keep that misconception. It's hard to get rid of it. But if you can make that change before they leave, you've got them, and you can really change the way they think about things.
It's the same reason some companies look for people with inexperience instead of professional experience sometimes, because they're looking for people that don't have a preconceived notion of how this is done and don't come, across the ladder from another company or something. They want to be able to teach them how they want it done from the get-go. So it's the same sort of thing. And tell me, okay, so you guys, you and someone else, right, has a podcast.
Yeah. So myself and my buddy Kyle Anderson, we have a podcast called The Sons of Technology. And, a lot of people go, oh, why does it have to be the sons of technology? Why can't it be the daughters of technology? Right. And the reason is the sons, it's a playoff of the show Sons of Anarchy. Right.
Yes.
And in the Sons of Anarchy, I mean, whether you've seen that show or not, it's really all about, not following the status quo, right? Kind of being that rebel, being the one to step out of line. And I always say you can't be a leader if you're following, and nobody's ever remembered for following the status quo. It's the people that step out of line and do it their own way. Those are the people that are always remembered. And so that's what we really strive to do with Sons of Technology. And then also the word sons, and I put it in quotes because it comes from a biblical verse. It's from 1 Thessalonians 5:11. And it says, you are the sons of light, the daughters of day. So let us not sleepwalk through life like the others. Let us keep our eyes open and be smart. So keep speaking encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so you will all be together in this with no one left out and no one left behind. I know you're already doing this. Just keep on doing it. And that's what we tell each other all the time. The reason we're training these teachers how to utilize these tools is because we know it's going to benefit them. We know it's going to benefit their kids. And so we're just going to keep on proudly showing what can be done. Even if they say no, we're going to keep proclaiming it because we know that's the way it should be done. And we're just going to keep building each other up. We're never going to knock people down. I never, ever, ever would tell a teacher who doesn't want to follow what I'm doing that they're doing it wrong. I'm going to tell them, okay, well, tell me, what are you struggling with? What's the hardest part about being a teacher? What would you change? And by listening to them, I can showcase some tools that can help fit those problems that they're talking about. And so I never knock people down. I always want to build people up. And that's what the Sons of Technology are all about. And so that's why we utilize the term sons, because we're always helping, always willing, and we're always there for the benefit of education.
Cool, cool. And you just quoted a biblical verse. And what I think is pretty amazing is you do that sort of thing from your keynotes sometimes, right? When you go to conferences and things, you will quote from, I know you've told me you've quoted from, or you've taken a piece of a message or something that you heard on Sunday, and then you've said, hey, that fits something I'm talking about. And then you've talked about it in a public forum, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I always, quote Matthew, right? When he's talking about, Jesus and his disciples are in the boat, and it starts rocking, and there's storm is coming, and everything's going wrong, and Jesus gets out and walks on water, and he looks over to his disciples and says, basically, what are you worrying about? I'm here. Follow me. Here's my hand. If I can do it, you can do it. And so don't listen to everything around you. Don't listen to everything that's telling you can't. Don't listen to everything that you're scared about. Listen to me. Follow me, because if I can do it, so can you. And so, the disciple gets out and follows Jesus, but the moment he doubts, the moment he doesn't think it's possible, the moment he steps away, he falls through the water. And I always tell teachers, that's what teaching is about. Teaching is about following each other. And I don't mean like following the leader, but following people who are doing things that are different, so that you can match being different as well. And I always say, to my daughters, I'm going to say this, and my parents told this to me. It's like, your friends are going to determine who you become. So you're either going to follow people that are wanting to make a difference, that are going to be steadfast in their views and keep pushing forward, or you're going to follow people that just want to lounge around and don't want to really do anything with their life. And so with teachers, you're either going to follow teachers that say, this is the way we've always done it, so keep doing it this way, or you're going to follow teachers that rock the boat but don't care. Who are you going to be as an educator? And I would want to follow somebody who's doing things that is different, because as we know, the world is changing exponentially every single day. And if you've taught kids this, if you're teaching kids the same way you taught 20 years ago, you're not doing the new kid service. We have a whole new chapter of a way these kids communicate and collaborate and get their information. And we have to match that in education. And I don't mean we have to pander to them. You don't have to be like a put on a show, but you do have to be relevant to them. And I always tell teachers, I go, think about this. I go, imagine if the bell rings and you've taken roll, and if they can just get up and walk out and they wouldn't be in trouble, would they get up and walk out of your classroom? If the answer is yes, then you're not meeting them where you need to meet them. If the way you teach and that bell rang and they all are in their seats waiting to see what's next, you have them, that's the teacher that I want to be. That's the teacher that I want to proclaim, is I want them to stay. And I would always say the best lesson is when that bell rang and it was time for break and none of the class moved, because they just want to see more. That's engaging. That's how you're going to get them. And that's how you get education to stick with a lot of these kids. It's by becoming relevant to them.
Well, yeah, I love what you said there about your friends determining kind of your life. And I love what Andy Stanley says about this. He says your friends determine the quality and direction of your life. So those you choose to be around, those you choose to let influence you, is going to determine where you're going. So if you want to see what you're going to look like in 10 years, just look at your friends, right? So anyways, all right, let's switch gears just a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like technology use and the church and ministry, because I can imagine that your brain just fires off things when you're in any environment of how things can be used or done differently. So just speaking broadly, global church, what do you see as some of the ways that technology is helping the ministry or mission of the church? And what are some of the ways that we need to kind of reevaluate?
Well, the number one thing that I always tell people is, I go, if God didn't want social media to exist, it wouldn't exist. So it exists because he allows it to exist. And if we as churchgoers don't jump on social media and proclaim Jesus and proclaim God, if we don't do that, then we're allowing everybody else to just create this noise. And so people think social media is there for debauchery and is there for this and that. It's because that we don't go on social media and put verses in there and lift people up and do that kind of thing. So I think churches should embrace social media more, and also make sure that they tell their congregation, tweet out your favorite verse from today. Here's a hashtag that we're going to be utilizing for our church. Hey, before you leave, I want you to do it. I want you to tweet something out now. I want you to post something on Instagram. And so I would do that in my classroom all the time, because if I let them leave my class and then said, hey, tweet when you can, they would never do it. I want them to do it before they leave the seats. And so doing stuff like that during a sermon, I think is very powerful, and it can really push the mission of the church because you're actually doing that. And I've seen a lot of people do periscoping when we're worshiping. I see a lot of people doing Facebook Live. Those are things that we should really encourage our followers to do, because we want to take social media back for us. We don't want that debauchery to be number one thing that social media is doing. And so that's what I think we should be doing as well. And then I think right now we are really showcasing what can be done in the digital age with the church, right? Mm-hmm. By being able to live stream our services, by being able to showcase what we can do when we're not together. The Bible says, wherever there's two people worshiping in my name, that's a church. He doesn't say face to face, right? And so you can still be a church. You can still fulfill that through social media, through a live broadcast, because you're still all worshiping together. You can still be a church when you're a distance church. And I think that's what people have to understand, because I've been reading things online about how some churches are not stopping their services because they say we have to meet together. We cannot be fearful of this. And I say, look, you can still be together. We just have to make sure that we're making sure our members are safe. And I think some of the people just have the wrong message about that. And I think what we're doing at Two Cities is the correct way. And I think that what a lot of churches are doing by creating a virtual service, I think that's a great way to keep God at the forefront, but doing it in a digital way.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's been a lot of innovation around this. In fact, you're talking about social media. I've always been intrigued, fascinated, and jumped on social media. One of the first adopters for a lot of things. When Twitter came out, I had a BlackBerry. Okay. This is before the second rise of BlackBerry, which was like a couple of years ago or whatever, but I had a Pearl, right? So BlackBerry Pearl, and Twitter was completely through text, unless you actually logged on a computer, and you could just text, the username and 40404, and you could get all the updates, even if you weren't on Twitter. And I remember that. It was such a game changer for me. And I remember adopting Myspace for youth ministry, which I was so against Myspace when I first heard about it. And then I was like, all the kids are on there. I have to be on there because it's the only way I'm going to be able to contact them throughout the week. They don't answer the phone. They don't return phone calls, and they didn't have any emails at that point. So I was like, I had to do this. So it's always morphing and always changing the tools through which people are communicating. And we just need to be aware. I want to go where people are going to listen, the virtual water wells, the places where people gather. That's one of the reasons that there's an actual very popular online streaming platform that is made for free for churches to use, but you have to put it at a different domain name. So it's going to be, your churchname.churchonline.com or something like that. I like it. I like the service, but it's not where people are already at. So that's why I'm like, hey, let's be on Facebook. Let's do it there, because people are already there and we can share it organically, and people can jump in that wouldn't find it in other ways. So even though it's actually harder for us technically and like setting it up and everything, it's more shareable. It's more accessible to more people. So that's why we're doing that. I really love some of the stuff that you're sharing with me here. There's another guy who he calls himself a social media pastor. His name is Dave Adamson, also known as Aussie Dave. He works at North Point Ministries in Atlanta. He started with an Instagram account teaching people biblical principles and Hebrew words with images and then the text. And he started it really because his daughter has dyslexia and has a hard time reading. And so he wanted to teach her the Bible through visual aid. And so he started doing it as a personal project, and it just took off and people just loved it. And so now he's on YouTube and he's all kinds of stuff. And he got to go, I just watched a video of him. He's like a huge guy right now during this crisis because everyone's running to him. What should we do, Dave? What should we do? What should we do? We don't know what to do. How do we do this? And so he's been putting out tons and tons and tons of helpful resources in the past couple of weeks for churches to utilize. But stuff like that is really inspiring to me. I really, really enjoy people like that. Now, there's another thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you about, and that's eSports, because we've talked a few times about eSports and the ramifications of eSports and the push towards eSports and away from eSports from different camps. But you've been involved in trying to utilize it to better engage students. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So esport, when I first heard about it too, I'm like, what, really, video gaming as a sport? I mean, come on. But when I started really thinking about it and talking to people who are really into this, it's not about the actual game. It's not about, esports. It's about getting kids who are going home and getting into a room and closing the door, putting on this headset and playing with strangers,
right,
who are not getting the skills of communicating and collaborating and being part of a team, that are just going home, that we're really missing out on. Right. I mean, it's for the kids that don't want to be in choir, that don't want to be in band, that don't want to be in soccer, that don't want to be in football or basketball or volleyball. It's the kids that don't want to do any of that, but they know gaming. And so why not create a team where you can get those kids together and become, create this camaraderie with one another in the same room. And we always talk to schools about this. Once again, it's not about the video game. You're not, when you practice, it's not about coming in and playing video games for 2 hours. Part of the situation is whiteboarding. So you get the entire team together. You watch on Twitch the team that you're going to play. You have a researcher on the team who's watching the tendencies and what the kids are doing and where they're hiding and what they're doing. And you whiteboard out, this is their master gamer right here. This is where he normally goes. This is the skill that he normally uses. This is the thing that he normally does. How are we going to defeat that? And you whiteboard that and talk it out. And then you have another team member that emulates that team. And then you have another gamer that plays against that person, so that you're really creating these skills. Also, it's not about who can play the game and who can't, because the researchers don't have to know how to play video games. They just have to know how to find the tendencies and explain that to the team. Creating a social media person for this team is incredibly important as well. So, social media jobs are exploding right now. And so you have a lot of colleges that are creating whole degrees in becoming a social media advertising person. And so why not get those skills already with the esports team? And then also putting together a videography team for the team. Right. I always tell teams, I go, how amazing would it be when you actually have an esports match? I mean, like boxing. Like, I've never really got into boxing, but my favorite part of watching a boxing match is the very beginning, where they have that short film on what the person did to get ready and what his life was about. All of that, you go, oh, you know what? I want to vote. I'm going to root for that guy because he's gone through a lot. And this, why not put together a whole thing about the kids, where they've come from, what they've done to prepare? I mean, create this videography and play that before the matches, so you can really get into that. And so you're getting schools that are actually doing all of this. And then also you need to create advertisements for the events. So you have the kids create their own posters. So you got artwork and all. So you have all these different people working together for a common goal. So you don't necessarily have to be a gamer to be a part of esports. And also, one last thing I want to say about esports is it's one of the only sports not to have a boys team and a girls team. Not like a softball and baseball or a girls basketball, boys basketball. It's esports. And so you're playing with girls and guys. And it is one of the only sports that there is no there is no special education kid that can't come in and play. When Fresno Unified had their esports tournaments, there were kids in wheelchairs. There were deaf students. There were students that needed special controllers. So everybody is accepted. Everybody is playing. There is nobody that is left out. That's the reason I love esports. So it's not about playing the video game. It's about creating a situation where these kids would not have access to teamwork and collaborating that other kids have the access to by playing football or basketball or anything else. And one last thing on this is, I've talked to parents, and one time a parent said to me, she was crying, and she said, I have never seen my student actually hang out with another kid ever. And he's smiling and he's talking. It's like a whole new kid. And that is amazing, because you finally give life to a kid that feels like he didn't have one. That's how esports feels to me. So it's once again, it's not about screen time. It's not about video games. It's about creating a culture for these kids to finally feel like they belong.
So that's really interesting. And what I hear you saying is that it's a very inclusive environment, that anyone can do it. And so you don't have to have special physical abilities or genetic, advantages. It's just anyone can be involved and everyone can be involved. And there's some way that anybody can be involved. What I really like about that is all the different avenues in which the kids are learning skills. It's really not about playing the game. It's not the skill of the game, but all these other skills to put on the events and be a part of a team and all that sort of stuff. I didn't even think about whiteboarding. That's deep. They're going deep, man.
No, and one of the things is some of these kids would never even think about going to college. And now there are $18 million worth of scholarships just for eSports. Wow. And these kids would be going to college. They could pick a degree, in whatever they want. And a lot of the kids going to college doing eSports are doing coding. They're doing social media management. Sure. They're doing a lot of the things that they wouldn't normally do. And a lot of these colleges are creating giant eSports arenas, because, projections say by 2028, colleges are going to be aching for kids because the population of college-age kids are going to be dwindling at that point. And so you're going to have a lot of colleges either closing down or joining with other colleges. So in order to entice new kids who would not be going to college regardless, is by creating this new esports arena. So you have a lot of colleges doing that to entice kids to come.
Right. Wow. That's such an interesting thought, because you don't think about colleges suffering for students. It was always like, oh, I didn't make it into college, or I didn't make it into the college I wanted. But thinking down the road, they may have the pick of the litter.
Yep, absolutely. And it goes back to 2008 when the economy dropped. Less people had kids at that point. And so 20 years later, boom, where we're going to be by 2028. Right. That's exactly where we are, a huge drop in college-age kids. And so colleges are going to need to find a way to get those butts in the seats, and esports is a way. And now that we're in this COVID crisis and everybody's home, we're going to have a boom in kids again, right? Is that the projection that we're talking about? Yeah. Somebody said, there was like millennials and this and that. There's going to be corvinnials or something like that. Yeah, because it's going to be a huge boon and people looking for things to do right now, I guess, right? So you can have a huge boon in kids.
So there's an interesting, and I don't know if you've ever heard of these people, but there's a guy who started using Twitch and using his love for gaming and all those sorts of things, and his ability to speak that language to many people who also enjoyed that world. He started something called God Squad Church on Twitch, which they now have a couple of physical locations, if I understand correctly, where they have normal church services, but they also have like tournament rooms, and they hold tournaments, and they're in esports. Like they have teams, and they go to competitions, and they have small groups, and they have all these sort of traditional or modern kind of church things, but then they also have all these sort of interest-based groups also, and they've merged it into this church that is a gamers church, a church for gamers. And I find that so interesting, because I don't know that this is how the future is going to be, but we have the ability, I should say, that ministries and churches could niche down to interest groups, and they can have specific sort of interests that they gather to do for fun, but then also there's this worship Jesus portion, there's this learning about God portion, and there's this character formation portion that is the church part of it. And then there's the interest stuff and the fun stuff that they do that is an outlet and also an outreach to other people in that same interest niche. And so I've heard of, in the past, there's different people who've done like skate church, or I've heard of someone trying to do a Disney church for like cast members of Disney parks and stuff like that. So what do you think about those kinds of concepts?
No, I love it, because the thing about it is most of the times people are, they don't want to be a part of something either because they don't understand it, or they don't think they're going to be accepted, or they don't think they're going to do it right. Right? Like teachers that don't use technology, a lot of times it's not because they hate technology, but they feel like they're not going to do it right. And so it's going to make them look like a worse teacher, or they're not going to know how to use it that well. So it's going to make them look dumb in front of their kids. So it's that fear factor that prevents them from doing it. And so instead of saying all those things that they're fearful about, they just say, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. And so I think it's the same thing about people going to church. A people say, oh, I'm not a church person, or I'm not this. It's because they're fearful that when they go to church, they're going to be judged by their past, or they're going to be judged about who they are, or they're going to feel different with all these people around them. So by creating a church with a hook for specific groups of people, I think it's incredibly encouraging because it gets them to the point to be able to hear the message, but they feel like they belong. And so you'll finally get people that say, I'm not a church person, to always want to go to church because they feel like they do belong and they understand it. And they're with people that they can feel a kinship with, a camaraderie with.
Right.
And so I think it's very important to be able to, as you can change up the way that you're delivering the message, as long as you're keeping the message on point. And so I think any kind of church that's either skateboard church, eSports church, any Disney church, as long as you're putting God and Jesus at the forefront in your message, it doesn't matter how that delivery happens or how to get those butts in the seats.
Right. As long as skating and Disney and eSports doesn't become an idol that the church worships, but a method through which they reach people and gather people, just as long as the prioritization is right and that sort of thing. I think that's important as well. But they stream, like this God Squad Church, they stream their services, and then they're streaming all the time their games also. And I think, and they have a Discord, which is a whole nother world that I don't understand. They have a Discord thing, which is like different chat rooms and things, I think, or message boards. I don't quite get it, but they have all these different categories that people can go in and communicate. And I think they have like 800 something people in their Discord community. So I just think that's super interesting, that concept. But it also means that people, for them, don't have to be localized to be a part of their church because they utilize so much technology. The people are watching or engaging from all over the place, but then they do have a local aspect as well. So that's very interesting to me. So random brain firing, right? Okay. So in this time, during this shutdown, what if, and I bet you somebody's out there doing it, but what if a youth leader or a church hosted like a Fortnite tournament online as an outreach event? People are in their homes, dads and kids are playing, like my neighbors next door, dad is playing every moment he can get, like it. Would that be that would be something interesting. I'd love to see what the implications of that would be, but that might be a way that people can engage kids where they're at right now when they're not doing schoolwork, they're stuck inside, they're playing games. Fortnite's one of the biggest games right now in the world on so many platforms. What do you think about that?
I know. I think that's phenomenal. And I'll tell you why. Because, I talk to a lot of parents all the time, and, I talk about social media and your digital footprint and that kind of thing. And parents all the time tell me, oh, my kid's not going to be on social media until they're 13, or my kid's not going to be on social media until they are a freshman in high school. And then I ask them, okay, do you let your kids play Xbox Live or video games online? They go, oh, yeah, all the time. I go, that's social media. Because social media is anytime people can be social via a media streaming device. And so if a lot of parents are letting their kids put on these headsets and talk to strangers, curse, not knowing anything that's going on.
Yep.
And so by being able to have that event through church, knowing that they're going to be playing people who are, going to be talking in a certain way and who are going to be respectful, I think that could be a huge boon to parents because the kids get to play what they want. The kids get to be out there on the Fortnite field, but the parents can be there also playing, right? But also be aware that, hey, they're talking to people that have our beliefs and that are good people and that kind of stuff. And so I think that would be a huge encouragement to parents to be able to see churches doing that because they know their students or their kids are going to be in good hands.
Yeah. So that's just a really interesting thought because my son likes to play Fortnite, right? He's 10 years old. He saved up his money and he's bought an iPad. He's bought a Switch. He's in his room right now. I have a wall right here, right behind this camera. He's on the other side of the wall. He can probably hear me talking through the wall right now because I'm in my Garoffice. This is my office garage thing, right? Yeah. So he's in there playing right now. He's already done his schoolwork. It's almost 2:45 in the afternoon. So now he's in there. I guarantee he's watching something on his iPad. And at the same time, he's playing something on his Switch. And so we limit the screen time, but now this time of day as part of his allowance for screen time. And at 3:00, it'll be done and we'll go on a long walk, because that's what I do at 3:00 these days, is get the kids out of the house for a little bit. But he's 10 years old and all his friends play Fortnite, like friends from school. That's his contact with his friends right now, because they can't contact any other way. He has iMessage, so he's allowed to text through iMessage with a few people, which, by the way, he utilized on Sunday to invite to our stream on YouTube. Like, he texted all of them with the link and said, you should watch this. And I'm like, dude, that's awesome. You're sharing our church service and you're watching it on your own, on your iPad. Awesome. But I'm just thinking about these kids who are they're just spending, so much time. There's a student, I think he's a junior right now. He sometimes comes to our church, and he streams on YouTube. He plays different games, streams. He's made a few $1,000s from it. He's in high school, it's his world. That's what he wants to do. Right. So anyway, it could be interesting to try something like that out. I really don't know how to do that, but perhaps we could figure it out.
I mean, I think that would be great. That'd be fun. Kind of like the Lego League that we do, right? Esports team, we call it God Squad, right? That'd be phenomenal for the kids to do. And it would really put, parents at ease, because you're absolutely right. Parents do not think about video gaming as social media, but a lot of times these kids put those headsets on, they join a whole different world. Mm-hmm. And once again, like we said at the beginning of this podcast, your kids become who they hang out with.
That's right.
And if they start hanging out with people on these video games or in these chat rooms that you don't know, you're going to start seeing kids. You see it all the time on the news when a kid does something wrong or bad and it's in the news. The parents go, I don't know how our son or daughter did that. I mean, they grew up in a nice household, this and that.
Right,
it's because they're doing things that they don't know about. And so, if there was a church that was willing to create this Fortnite tournament or Fortnite game, I think would put parents at ease in that fashion.
Yeah. And I have an agreement with my son, and he's the oldest, so he's the one who follows the rules the best. The other two, I probably wouldn't be as lenient or trusting of quite yet. But like, anytime he wants to subscribe to somebody on YouTube, like, he has to talk to me about it. He has to show me what they're about. And every once in a while I'm like, I'm sorry, no. And he's like, but why? And I'm like, I just need you to trust me, because I just need you to trust me. It's not good for you. But there's just a couple of questionable things that I just don't think is good for you. And so, and he's like, okay, but he always asks, can I subscribe? Can I watch these guys? Can I engage with this? And there's like a kid's social media app that he has on his iPad you can't post your own pictures. You don't ever use your own name. Like, it's a very monitored thing. I can't even remember what it's called. Pop something. I can't remember. But so it's all like drawn pictures and little emojis and different things like that. And so he's on there with my permission. And I check in on things and have apps that monitor different things, which I think is important for parents, just to keep the kids, keep them in line and make sure that they're not going places they shouldn't go and stuff like that. Because eventually he will be faced with some kind of content that I know is bad for him, and he'll have to make a decision without me or mom there. And so I want to train him as best I can now to understand what is harmful and helpful, and to make wise decisions about those things. So if we can do that in the little things now, I'm praying that pays off for the big things later.
Yep. And I do a lot of digital citizenship nights for school districts and with parents. So parent nights. And we talk about digital footprint and the importance of a correct post and a bad post, and how to cultivate your footprint to be, because I always tell them, it's like a garden, right? If you water it and you use the right stuff, it's going to grow and be beautiful. If you stomp all over it, it's going to look nasty. Mm-hmm. And these social media apps that we're using, that's what colleges are looking at now. Right? They'll ask you, what's your Instagram handle? What's your Facebook handle? What's your this handle? And they know that if the kids are like, I better create a new one just for this college, they'll know when it's created. They know all the ins and outs of what's going on. And so, and they know if you don't put one, I wasn't allowed on social media. they know you're kind of lying a little bit, right? You have to have some social media footprint. And so I talk to parents about this all the time, and I talk to them about their students' devices. First thing I say to all the time is, who bought it? Who's paying for it? You. So you can say, I want to check it at any moment and not feel like the bad guy, right? And I always tell them, here's a digital citizenship device contract. You all go through it, you each sign it, and then they know what to expect. And then I go into all the things kids are doing to hide things from their parents. Like you can change the icon for every tool and rename it right out of the device. I saw kids, there was a Bible app that had a chat room. And so the kids would go into the chat room and talk like this, and parents wouldn't know. They just thought their kids were really into the Bible at that point. There's an app called fake GPS. Like if parents are following where the kids are going on the iPhone, there's a fake GPS they could turn on and put them anywhere, and they say on, and the parents see them at that one singular location, nowhere else. I mean, I sometimes I do that. Well, not for my wife, but I'll put myself like somewhere like in London, and then I'll do a tweet. It'll say from London, and people will think I'm in London when I'm not. I'm just using this fake GPS. But kids do it all the time. Saying, hey, I'm going to Sally's house. They'll put the GPS on Sally's house and go somewhere else.
Wow.
And so parents need to be aware of all these things so that they can, be able to go into the devices and because even though they change all the different names and icons, you can still go into the system settings and see what's there. You can't change those. And so I show parents, go in there, weekly, monthly, and just check to make sure that your kids are on point. Because kids will be kids, and kids will always find a way to circumvent the rules. And so we just have to make sure we're on point with that. Like my wife, Molly, we have one rule in the house about our kids. We will not create a footprint for them without their permission. So we don't post any images of our daughters where you can see their face, because we don't want to put that out there. We want them to have control of that. And so, to the point where my wife will take a picture and she'll like, can I post this? Can I post this? Yes, you can post that. Right. But she's making sure that she's following the rules of a digital footprint. And I tell parents all the time, I go, if you tell your kid, if they're hanging out with, let's say everybody in their group, they have a group of 10 and they're all on Instagram, Facebook, all these social medias, but you're telling your kid they can't, they're already on social media. Right. Because their friends are taking pictures of them. Their friends are posting on them. So now their digital footprint, they have no control over it because their friends are doing all that. And so I tell kids all the time, I go, if you tell your friends that they don't have permission to post any images of you unless you've seen it first. And so my wife really takes that to heart and she follows it along because, the way kids are, any image or any statement can be misconstrued because they may think they're making a joke. But if people outside of your realm of friends see that, they think it's true. And then boom, things can go haywire at that point.
They can go south fast.
Oh yeah.
Well, hey man, tell this is the second episode for the podcast.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I've got several other people I'm going to be interviewing in the coming months. Most of them are like, can we do it after Easter? Because most of them are in ministry and pastors and that sort of thing. And they're like, I have no time right now. This is crazy with all this, because for us, nothing has slowed down about the job. We've had to learn a ton of things and speed up things that we were working on in the background so that we could have more influence online with what we're doing. So it's been quite a crazy whirlwind. But tell us where whoever we are, whoever's listening or watching, because I'll put it on YouTube and all the places, where can they find you and get information about what you do?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. So that's the number one social media that I use. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Marquez 70. And then you can also find my YouTube channel with a whole bunch of tutorials for teachers, how to utilize new technologies in a step-by-step fashion. And that's youtube.com/Sons of Technology. And then you can also listen to our podcast. Me and my buddy Kyle do a podcast by teachers, for teachers, no commercials, no product placements, all about how to, move education forward. And that's the podcast by the Sons of Technology. And you can find that on any of the podcasters that you are utilizing.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you find lots of success in everything that you're doing. And thanks so much for trying to get our teachers to think about new ways of doing things. And for those who have not moved into the, not the distant future, but the now, helping them come along as well and helping us stay in line. Thanks for all that. And if you ever put out a tutorial resource for parents on how they can monitor things, or, all of that stuff that you just talked about, like, definitely send that my way, because I'm going to be sharing that.
Absolutely. I have a whole file in my Google Drive with, pre-made contracts and everything like that. So I'll definitely share that folder with you, and you can pull out what you want and share it with the rest of the audience as well.
Oh, awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Micah. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for helping myself and my family become closer to God on a daily and weekly basis. So thank you so much. And I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for saying that, man. Anyways, God bless you. And you're going to be on our service this Sunday. So
absolutely. I'm getting that already.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I'll see you soon.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Well, thank you so much for joining us and watching or listening to this entire episode. Just to let you know, my wife and I also own a virtual assistant agency called dreamsupport.club. That is the website, dreamsupport.club. So if you need some virtual assistant help, if you need some help with administration, with your business, or anything that you are trying to tackle, whether it's a dream or a profession, we want to support you. We want to help you. So go to that website, check it out, drop us a line if you have any more questions. God bless you, and I hope to see you next time from the Garoffice.